So welcome to the National Football Museum. It's, what, 14 days and about 2.5 hours until the World Cup starts. So we thought we'd whet your appetite with an intriguing and kind of mysterious story about the trophy that started this whole history off of the World Cup, and of course was eventually replaced by the trophy that you know all too well, that is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Jules Rimet was under my bed. No, it wasn't some former FIFA president playing a prank on a sleeping friend. It is the story about the mystery and the inspiration of the Jules Rimet trophy. So this is an event put together by Campo Retro and the National Football Museum to just tell you a little bit about how it all came to be, a little bit of an insight into the first World Cup trophy and how it continues to inspire not only football fans, but of course what football fans wear. Let us introduce you to our esteemed panel of guests. Will you please welcome, first of all, welcome them all, please. Thank you. So we'll start on the far side. This is Ryan. Will you please welcome Ryan Steele, who is the Collections Officer here at the National Football Museum. Next to him, Martin Atherton, the author, academic, man who has plenty of anecdotes and stories to tell us about the history of the trophy that, of course, you can see on this wonderful table here with the Bobby Moore 1970 shirt against Brazil, courtesy of the National Football Museum. And standing between me and them, because he's security, because he knows that I'm too much of a football geek to not want to get all my hands on them for the rest of the evening, is David Blanch, who is the Head of Product Design at Campo Retro. So, David, I'm going to start with the present. And you can tell me about how this all began, how it all came together with Campo Retro and the National Football Museum.
Thank you. At Campo Retro, we wanted to create a collection like many people do for Brazil. But we're slightly different as a brand. We're quite a new brand, but we do things slightly differently. And we're really interested in insight and discovery. And really every product that we create has a story. And we like to go and find out the real truth behind the stories and get some proper detail. And we actually chose to focus on the Jules Rimet, simply because it's actually it's got so many stories to tell. Yeah, well, the thing that struck me was a simple thing that Brazil won it in 1970, and that was the third time that they won. And at that time, because the rule stated that anyone who won the World Cup for 3 times, they got to keep the cup. And so Brazil win it, and it was quite an amazing event anyway, and it was the first time that mesh shirts were worn. England wore mesh shirts, so I had this crest thing going on and this fabric thing going on, and we were sort of trying to bring everything together. But it goes back to Rio, and it was stolen. And that whole story fascinated me. I was thinking, okay, and it was never recovered. So it's somewhere or not. And I didn't know about this, and I knew these guys, and then I found out about Martin knew even more about it. I was like, okay, I have to go and speak to these chaps, because I needed to find out more detail.
Well, shall we do just that?
Please.
Yes. Let's take that hint. And Ryan, we know, most people know about 1966 and that it was found by Pickles the dog. A lot of people will also know, as Dave was just saying, that it then disappeared in Rio in the 80s. So, what's that then?
Well, that's a replica, but sort of an illegal replica, really, as Martin will tell you more about it, really. FIFA have copyright of the image, and this replica was made. So this is the only Jules Rimet trophy. That's what we call it. It's the Jules Rimet trophy. It's the only one. It's the only surviving one. So that's the Jules Rimet trophy for all intents and purposes.
So it's been here how long?
We got it straight away when the museum was open. It was like 2003. Obviously, the museum, when they first opened its doors, they were supported heavily by the Heritage Lottery Fund, and using that funding, we purchased FIFA's collection, which I'm sure they regret now, because we own everything that they have. So that was part of the FIFA collection, and it was one of our first things. I think when you're going to open the football museum, you need to, when you've got a bit of financial backing, because we are a charity and we rely just on donations and helps out. But when we started, we was given a big chunk of money, and the first thing we thought is, let's get the best collection in the world, and that was the FIFA one, and that was actually part of it.
So then, Martin, let's delve back into why this replica was made, and why indeed it was also some conjecture as to whether it was a replica or whether it still is a replica and where it might even be if it's not here. This is an extraordinary story. So we start with 1966 and we'll flesh it out a little bit after that. What happened and how did the police need pickles?
Right. Right, here's the brief version. It goes on a long way. The Jules Rimet trophy, we'll call it the World Cup, arrived in England in January 1966, ahead of the World Cup. And it was being taken out for exhibitions here, there and everywhere. People of a certain age, like myself, may remember seeing it on Blue Peter, for example. It was on there and it was on various places. There was various security concerns, and the FA decided they wanted a replica making. So they asked FIFA for permission, and as Ryan said, it's got their copyright. They said no, so nothing happened. And then in March 1966, it was on display at a stamp exhibition, of all places, in Methodist Central Hall in London, just round the corner from the Houses of Parliament, and ironically, just round the corner from New Scotland Yard. It was only there one day. It was there on the Saturday. The exhibition was closed on the Sunday. It was stolen. A story that everybody knows. On the following day, a ransom demand was issued for £30,000. Anyway, a week later, as everybody knows, Pickles, the dog, found the trophy on the following Sunday. A guy called David Corbett was out walking his dog. He lived in Croydon in South London, and his dog started snuffling around at some package wrapped in newspaper, and David was trying to pull the dog away and the dog wouldn't have it, so eventually it tore a bit of the paper and he saw gold shining through, which immediately attracted his attention. He picked it up, tore it off. Oh my Lord, this is the World Cup. Went inside and told his wife, and his wife went, so? Not at all interested. And
how things never change.
In the days before mobile phones, I had to then walk a long, long way to a phone box with the trophy in a carrier bag to phone the police to say he'd found the World Cup, which they thought was a hoax, and eventually they came out. So they got the trophy back. In the week in between, the FA had gone to a firm of jewellers called George Bird in London. They made the replica FA Cup that's given to the FA Cup winners every year. They made medals and trophies. They made all sorts of things for the FA. So they went to him and they asked for a replica to be made without FIFA's knowledge.
So this one had been created?
Yeah, this one's been created. They get the original one back. We don't need this anymore. Stop making it. So it wasn't quite finished. And then, once again, the trophy's being used for all these display purposes. They say that it's going to be increased security, but there wasn't. George Bird held, who was making the replica, they kept the real one in his strong room in Fenchurch Street in London because the FA didn't have their own strong room. He was taking the World Cup, the Jules Rimet trophy, around London on his bike, in the basket on the front of his bike, covered with a towel. And you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Some old guy on a bike with a basket on the front is not going to have the World Cup there. But, you know, he gets knocked off in a roundabout or something, then you have a real problem. Eventually, the FA is like, this is not safe. So they told him, right, continue to make the replica. Then after that, every time that you see the replica on display before the World Cup final, it's the replica, it's not the real one. So when you see the photographs at the Royal Garden Hotel that evening, where all the players are on the balcony, the famous photographs, that's the replica, it's not the real one.
So where did the real one go? They switched it out?
That just went back into the vaults of George Bird's company.
And so for the next, what, 4 years? Mm-hmm. What's the host get to keep the real trophy?
The host gets to keep,
the winners get to keep the real trophy.
The winning association get to keep the real trophy. So they kept that until January 1970, when it's then returned to FIFA, who then pass it on to the host organisation. At that point, you don't need the replica anymore that nobody knows about. And as Ryan said, it's illegal. Nobody knows about this. So then it's quietly given back to George Bird. And eventually it just got put away to one side as the children got older, and it was underneath his bed, apparently stored under George Bird's bed, and then he died. And in 1995 it was sold at auction. And that's when the story gets even more bizarre.
Okay, so George Bird sadly passes away. Mm. This replica trophy is under his bed. His family have it, and suddenly it comes to light that this thing exists. What does FIFA think about this?
What they might have been thinking, which, well, what we do know, it was put up for auction in 1995. And FIFA decided, quietly, surreptitiously, that they wanted it. Because, as we mentioned, the original trophy was stolen again in 1983, never recovered. The general consensus is that it was melted down, because all around Rio at that time there were lots and lots of illegal foundries, and it was believed to be gold. It wasn't, it was believed to be gold. It's never been recovered, so it's either in somebody's garden shed, or it was melted down, and I believe it was melted down for bullion. But
so this is 14 years later. After that had happened in 1983, suddenly, 14 years later,
12 years later,
George Bird dies, and then this one comes up.
And this is, as far as we know, this is the first time FIFA become aware of it. They find out the full story. They must have found out the full story. There's then some doubt about, okay, if this replica is an exact reproduction of the real one, might the replica have been given to Brazil by mistake? And the replica been stolen, and this be the real one? I don't know who was advising them, because it's quite obviously not, but anyway. The instructions from Sepp Blatter are buy it at any cost, whatever it costs. And a representative of the FA went to the auction, and the Bird family thought they might, at a push, get £30,000 for it. In the end, it went for £255,000. But then again, it's like the real World Cup. The one that disappeared. It's what it represents. That's where the value lies in it, and the fact that the England players did hold that. I remember talking to Bobby Charlton, and we're asking him, did it devalue anything when the fact that he found out they'd held the replica rather than real trophy? And so the trophy doesn't matter. It's what it represents. It's the fact that they won the World Cup and had it. It didn't matter whether it was made out of tin foil or whatever. That's what counted.
Exactly, and historical artefacts over the years, haven't they? You'll know as a person who clearly spends their life with them, it is about that. They don't have to be of essential value. It's of the emotional value that you place on them. I mean, that's so much backstory, isn't there? Well, to add to design features as well. How do you try and encapsulate all of that?
Well, I would just like to add that the thing is, as I said at the beginning, normally when we set off on a creative process, we take a slightly different route of just looking for insight. And insight's fascinating when you go and talk to people, but this story was so immense. That's actually the reason why we invited everyone, and we're doing more with it as well. It was too big for us to just go, yeah, we'll create a nice little collection of garments. We just had to share it with you guys, because having spoken to the experts, I've been working in football for many years, and I was blown away by this story. And I'm still today fascinated by how it can be so complex. So it just inspires me. And in answer to your question, how did we take it from this? We went through a fairly straightforward process, because we didn't want to do anything too fancy, but we wanted to create a badge. Everyone knows Three Lions badges, but we actually wanted to create a World Cup badge for all teams that was inspired by victory, because it was a victory cup. And so we combined the medals, that every player got one of these medals during the period of the Jules Rimet. And I've seen 3 of those medals from the museum, and actually, whilst all those medals are the same, visually, they're all different. They're different golds, different weights, and so I don't know if it's just different jewellers making them. But we've taken the silhouette of the medal, we've taken Christ the Redeemer in the front, and we've hidden Jules Rimet Cup behind it, because while some people think it's been melted down, I'm more of a romantic. I'd like to think that it might turn up this year. And I also like to think that actually it's a lie, and that's the real one. Because I quite like the fact it's here. So anyway, so we created a badge, and we've used this badge on all of the products. Campo created quite a large collection of products. We've created a new mesh. This mesh was inspired and created from Bobby Moore's shirt, and actually this was made originally by Umbro, and the factory made this was in Macclesfield, not far from here. And the people who were involved in the production of that fabric, we went and saw the insight from them, so we know how that was knitted. So we've knitted our version of that. So in total, we just wanted to share with you a story that we found fascinating, and we wanted to encapsulate it into a shirt so then we can tell this message out, because, as I said, everyone has a different version of it. I said I'm a romantic and I like to think that it still exists. But the little crest that we've created is effectively our victory crest.
Well, thank you very much. A couple of points of order before we wrap things up. First of all, if you want to come and have a private chat with the guys, I'm sure they'd be okay to say hello. And clearly Dave can show you a little bit more about the designs here. If you want to find out more about the ones that aren't here, you go to camporetro.com. Thank you very much to both Campo Retro and the National Football Museum. They've clearly put on a wonderful event that I know you felt very welcome at, and hopefully you've learnt a little bit as well. I certainly have, and so it just remains for me to thank my guests. So thank you to Ryan, to Martin, and to David. You put your hands together, please, and thank them all. Thank you. And have a wonderful evening, and remember, don't steal it. It's been done before. Been there, done that. Got the 1970 Bobby Moore t-shirt. So have a very good evening. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Thank you. Good night.